So let me go ahead and look at the model paper. I'll read through some of it. Mary Shelley and Frankenstein. As I read through, I want you to pay particular attention to every time a source is used and how it is documented in the paper, because that's usually, what people really need to learn how to do. Mary Shelley wrote a story that set itself apart from all others, and it has withstood more than 200 years of criticism. Frankenstein reflects society's views toward women, not only in its own time, but to some extent in our time as well. Shelley wrote her female characters in very submissive roles, with no control over their own lives. Men dominated women at home, work, and in society. Shelley's own life was one of great tragedy. Her mother was a fiercely independent woman and struggled for women's rights at the time. However, she died days after giving birth to Mary, who consequently grew up in a male-influenced society devoid of a strong female role. In Frankenstein, Shelley's women are opposite of the kind of woman her mother was. She chose to exhibit these women in much weaker and more fragile roles, which begs the question or questions, was Mary Shelley in her own way, let me scoot this up a little bit, was Mary Shelley in her own way presenting these women in such insubstantial roles to exhibit the audacity of society's view of women, to be seen and not heard, or could she be reflecting something much more sinister? Her inner self at a time when she had lost so much. So here's her thesis question that the paper will attempt to answer. Could this be her way of giving life to an infant of sorts and controlling or dealing with the pain of her own loss? Before Mary was barely 17 years old, she had left home with a married man and within months had delivered an infant that had died within days after birth. It was during this period when Mary Shelley conceived, I love the use of conceived here, conceived the story we have come to love, Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. Mary Shelley created an ominous and tragic tale of a man who created a monster, Dr. Victor Frankenstein. He had done the unthinkable. He defied the order of nature and created a child, a monster. Shelley describes the early morning Victor Frankenstein gave birth to the creature. Lots of quotes. You want to use a lot of quotes in your paper. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe? And this is the voice of Victor Frankenstein. How to delineate the wretch whom with such infinite pains and care I had endeavored to form. His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful, beautiful. Great God, his yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing. That's from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, page 34. I'm going to ignore the phone in the background. Here Shelley illustrates the moment of beholding, the same every mother has when she gives birth, especially to their first child, a feeling Shelley herself no doubt had at the sight of her firstborn. But Frankenstein's moment is mixed with, overcome by, horror. But these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes that seemed almost of the same color as the dun white sockets in which they were set, his shriveled complexion and straight black lips. That's Shelley, page 34, from the text. Now notice she has included the author with the page number, although it's fairly clear that this is from her use of the text. So the word Shelley is not really even necessary here. This would be enough just to put in 34 because it is so clearly marked in the text that we're using Frankenstein. This image invokes a corpse. Shelley also had first-hand experience with death, that of her own infant. I wonder if her own infant's lips were straight and black and the complexion shriveled. That's a great question. With this creation, wait a minute, yeah. With this creation of Dr. Frankenstein's, good or indifferent, he has bypassed the necessity of the female. Shelley attempts to demonstrate the feeling society had of women at that time. They were an adornment, and they were looked upon as unintelligent and were not afforded the same respect as men. A very forbidding position to be in. In Mary Pooty's article, My Hideous Progeny, Mary Shelley and the Feminization of Romanticism, she states, after animating the monster, the product and symbol of self-serving desire, the exhausted scientist is immediately confronted with the dream explication of his crime. Having denied domestic relationships by indulging his selfish passions, he has, in effect, murdered domestic tranquility. That's pages 334, 335, and it's clear that those pages are referring to the Hoovy article. Frankenstein, in fact, has done away with the need for women, the home, and the heart of society. Furthermore, Mary Poovy illustrates Frankenstein's ego, quote, in effect, animating the monster completes and liberates Frankenstein's egotism, for his indescribable experiment explicitly objectifies desire. Paradoxically, in this incident, Shelley simultaneously literalizes the ego's destructiveness and sets in motion the more figurative, symbolic character of the monster, page 335. So every quote needs a page reference. It is my belief that Frankenstein wanted to have complete control. The man's ego was considerably large. He wanted to maintain control in all aspects of his life, even his masculine sexual desires. I believe Frankenstein could not deal with relinquishing his desire to a woman. The moment of sexual ecstasy was a situation he felt gave the woman power. My thought is, since women, in his mind, are an inferior species, Frankenstein was not comfortable with losing himself to a woman. One way to achieve this would be to eliminate all need for a female counterpart. Now, I'm just going to stop and mention one idea here, is that when this student uses this quote and this and identifies it, documents it by adding the page number in parentheses at the end, she doesn't just stop there. The quote never stands alone, and this is why this is a good sample paper. She goes on then to explain the quote and connect it directly to her idea, and then transitions into the next use of a source. Here's her second source. Anne Miller writes in Possessing Nature, the Female in Frankenstein, and uses another, if it's like 4 lines or longer, you need to just indent the quote, and then you remove the quote marks because that's redundant. The indenting does the same thing as the quotes. Frankenstein has eliminated the necessity to have females at all. One of the deepest horrors of this novel is Frankenstein's implicit goal of creating a society for men only. His creature is male. He refuses to create a female. There is no reason that the race of immortal beings he hoped to propagate should not be exclusively male. Eventually, and here's the student's comment again, eventually, interesting enough, the women in Frankenstein all die. After the death of their infant daughter, Percy Shelley left Mary alone. He either did not or could not deal with the death of Mary's depressed state. This left Mary alone to deal with the loss of her first newborn by herself. In My Hideous Progeny, Mary Shelley and the Feminization of Romanticism, Poovy writes, After Frankenstein's death, the creature disappears into the darkness of the novel's end, vowing to build its own funeral pyre, for it is as immune to human justice as it was excluded from human love. Page 338. The creature Frankenstein created wanted to have love and to be loved, and Frankenstein denied him both. Frankenstein's refusal to nurture and love his creation, or to craft a mate for him, gives the creature the feeling of loss, abandonment, and neglect. This abandonment may reflect Percy's actions toward Mary in regards to the loss of their daughter. Percy had left with Claire, Mary's half-sister, leaving Mary alone, without love and support, typical of male treatment of women in society at that time. Could Frankenstein, by Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin Shelley's outlet of her frustration at the events happening in her life and her feelings towards Percy at a time of crisis? Wait, let me read that again. Could Frankenstein be Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin Shelley's outlet of her frustrations at the events happening in her life and her feelings towards Percy at a time of crisis? Yes, I believe so. Now, maybe one thing I should have shown you right along was that all of these three sources of the actual text of Frankenstein, the Norton Critical Edition, and then these are in alphabetical order, although she did use Poobie first. They're not in alphabetical order. Huh. Okay, let's just move this one down here. There we go. Yeah, so all of the bibliographic, the complete bibliographic information is here included under Works Cited, and you always need the author's last name plus the page number in the text wherever you're employing a quote. For example, here's the author's last name and the page number. And that is MLA documentation style. All right, I hope you'll email me or call if you have any questions along the way on this paper. And I hope this model, this sample, helps you out.